Hello and welcome to the We All Follow podcast. My name is Matt Fox. I am your host. Today, I am joined by a skeleton crew of Sean Miller. Welcome back to the show, Sean. How's it going?
Hey, not too bad. How's it going?
It's going all right, man. It's been an interesting week in both Premier League and international football, but we are here and we are alive, and it's a great day. So follow us on X at We All Follow Pod. Never miss a show. Get all of the updates. It's great. And let's jump in to the format. What do you have for me for your moment of the week?
I noticed that when Arsenal doesn't play well, that this show is pretty barren. That's the
our
first.
friends go missing.
Where's all the Arsenal people? Yeah, no, I think during the week, just I'll go with the during the midweek matches first. I thought the Champions League. I mean, there were some pretty interesting scores. Eindhoven beating Girona, who was the darling of the Spanish league last year, 4-0. Celtic. The Red Bull teams are atrocious right now in European competition. I don't think they have a win yet.
Salzburg won, but other than that, it's been pretty rough.
Yeah. Oh, Salzburg won on Wednesday. That's right. I saw that stat on Tuesday. Well, Real Madrid. I mean, talking about that, the moment obviously for me was Amorim and Sporting just smoking Manchester City, and if you watch the match, it could have been 3-0 City in the first half, and they don't take their chances, and then it's 3-1, 2 goals right after the break, and Haaland misses his penalty, and Gyökeres doesn't with the hat trick. And I think
Joker's hat trick for sure.
I'll let you talk about the probably talk about the Arsenal game. On the weekend I thought obviously Spurs running Villa off the pitch, and then Villa losing on Tuesday I thought was pretty big too.
Yeah, it's been an interesting round of matches, both in the Premier League and in the Champions League. Right? You had, like you said, Spurs running Villa off the pitch 4-1. Villa are in kind of a weird spot right now, I think, with the run of fixtures that they had, as well as the results that they've been having lately. We'll see. We'll see if Unai continues to go full Unai or how that pans out. I think we'll talk about the Arsenal game in a bit, but I think the biggest thing for me was the Liverpool 4, Leverkusen 0. I thought that, I don't know if you watched the Liverpool Arsenal game. I thought that Arsenal mostly played Liverpool off the pitch.
Yep.
And Liverpool had Salah and set piece, right?
Yep.
And then they just destroyed Leverkusen, like just battered them from pillar to post. So I think the Arsenal Liverpool game had me putting Liverpool at a level below, like a notching them below. And I think that match showed that maybe that my estimation of them was a little bit under, and ultimately, like, they're a really good side, and they're going to be challenging for the league and the Champions League throughout the season, provided that their players can stay healthy.
Yeah, I mean, I think right now with the match day after match day 4, I think you can see a couple things. I think probably Liverpool and Barcelona are probably the two best teams. I mean,
performing the best at least, right?
Yeah, performing the best. But Barcelona scores for fun every match here. We'll see if that translates, late in the season. If they can, it looks like they'll win La Liga because Real Madrid is a mess right now. But the Champions League is, I think, where they need to kind of see if they're going to be one of these top teams. But the Champions League, I mean, you look at the results. I mean, it's just really some goofy results. Match day 4, you're halfway through, and you just see some PSG's playing not real well, and Villa losing 1-0. I mean, that's the.
Yeah,
Wait,
that was the
let me
same
tell you,
one.
that is the moment of the week. That is the craziest handball, craziest penalty. And you're like, what is he? You're watching it. You're just like, what the hell is he doing? What is he doing? He probably just thought he was kicking it to him but
It was the same. It was the same thing as Arsenal and in the Bayern match last year, and they didn't call it.
Yep.
Yeah, it's interesting because as I think when I started following the sport and really getting into it and watching the different competitions, I had this like conceptual idea that there's these different competitions, right? And like I know there's the domestic league, I know there's a European wide competition, I know there's domestic cups, but once you really get into it, you realize that they truly are different competitions, right? It's not just that you're playing different teams from different countries. It's that you're playing under a different set of rules, right? Yeah. And that might be interpretations of the same rules, or it's applied differently. Like you saw at the Arsenal Marino handball situation, right? Like that is a quintessential Champions League handball. That's how they apply the rule. If your hand is in an unnatural position, no matter what happens, no matter how it ends up touching your hand, it's a penalty, right? And that's the rule. That's how it's applied, and it's consistent, right? Which I appreciate the consistency aspect of it. I don't think that penalty gets called in the Premier League, as an example, right? So it's things like that. Like when you watch these competitions, that you see how different they are, right? Not only obviously in the teams that are participating, but in the way that they're officiated and the game flows and stuff like that.
So it's so hard to win. It's hard to win the Champions League. I mean, you especially as as an English team, you got to have a lot of stuff go right over the course of the entire group stage. And now it's different now, obviously, with these matches. But you got to have a lot of stuff go right over the course of the group stage, and then you got to have a lot of stuff go right in the round of 16 and the quarter. The draw sometimes is the draw opens up. This side is real easy. There's a lot of stuff that happens.
There's definitely a lot of luck. It's also the other leagues adjust their schedule to fit that competition, right? Even last year, you had the German teams and the French teams. Their league fixtures were rearranged around
Fridays.
Yeah, and so they had the league fixtures rearranged or postponed going into the ties, and obviously those extra days of preparation and rest matter, right? So yeah, it's been fascinating to see that. Obviously, also we have the new format, right, which is the league format, which everybody's figuring out how it works and how they're going to navigate that, right? I think you've seen more rotation in those matches than you might see, but it's more noticeable because you're playing bigger teams more often, right? In the old format, you might have one good team and two teams that are full of consonants, right? And now you have probably between 5 and 7 really tough matches that you can't really afford to rotate. I mean, to rotate in the same way that you might used to be able to do when you're going to whatever Romania to play, no disrespect, to play a consonant-ridden team. So, even last night when folks were talking about Inter's lineup, Arsenal didn't bring Declan Rice, right? I'm sure he was capable of playing if necessary. And Inter rotated, I think, 4 or 5 of their starters, right? But all of those guys came on and ended up playing 30, 45 minutes in the second half, right? So it's really interesting to see, like, you're playing bigger teams every week, but the teams are somewhat rotated. It's going to be really interesting, obviously, how it plays out this year, and then moving into the next year once the teams are more versed with the competition and what it's going to take to get through. But ultimately, those 8 spots at the top are going to be so important in terms of the fixture congestion, right? So I think you had up to this point to kind of figure it out, right? And then these next like maybe 2 or 3 games are going to be this major push to accumulate as many points as you can if you're in sniffing distance of that top 8, to make sure that you make it and don't have to play those 2 round of 32 fixtures.
I mean, you look at the schedule. Obviously these you said they moved the games on Fridays to for some of the leagues. In Portugal and France and Germany and those leagues also give them a little bit of a break in January or at the end of December and the Premier League's playing more games. Hey, let's stuff more
Right.
games to the thing.
Yeah.
It becomes crazy.
You know that Germany's going to have their holiday break, right, where they have 2 weeks off, 2 full weeks off, right? Like
Yeah.
the Premier League did it in a rolling basis. So last season they did that rolling so that they didn't miss any match weeks. There was a game every weekend, right? But yeah, you have the festive fixture period, and then the FA Cup starts, and like you were saying, it definitely makes it tougher for an English team to have success in those competitions, and I think that's why you've seen fewer English teams winning the competition, uh, regardless of the pedigree of the teams from that country. So let's move into the fixture table. After this week's results, Liverpool beat Brighton 2-1, so they're in first. Second is Man City, who lost to Bournemouth. Forest finished the weekend in third place. Chelsea moved up, and Arsenal are now in fifth after their defeat 1-0 at St. James's Park. Brings Aston Villa, Tottenham, Brighton, Fulham, and Bournemouth rounding out the top 10. Up from the bottom in the drop zone, we have Ipswich, Southampton, and Wolves. Southampton getting their first win of the season against Everton, a really, really big 3 points for them. Newcastle moving up into 11th, followed by Brentford. Man U moving up from 14th to 13th. West Ham in 14th, Leicester, Everton, and Crystal Palace, who managed to draw this weekend against bottom of the table Wolves. So yeah, let's chat a little bit more about the games from this weekend, this past weekend. I think there's a bus that's sitting outside of St. James's Park that still has all of the Arsenal players on it, because they did not show up. They didn't show up, in my opinion, and I think there's this saying, right? The other team can do tactics too, right? And I think that Eddie Howe, like whatever you think of his ability, he has the tactics to beat Arsenal, or not beat them all the time, but he has the tactics to stymie them and throw sand in their gears, right? And I think you've seen it from a few years back when Arsenal was chasing top five and they got throttled at St. James's Park. The following year, you had the 0-0 at the Emirates, where the ball and play time was really low. Arsenal beat Newcastle the next game at St. James's Park, with an Odegaard and Martinelli caused own goal. But then you had the 1-0 with the Jamie goal. So it's kind of been this like back and forth, right? Newcastle have a really good game plan. They execute it perfectly. They limit the ball and play time. They buy their fouls and they sit in, and they get the results. And then Arsenal get really mad and they come back for the next game and kind of beat them down. What was your takeaways from that game as you saw it play out in real time?
I mean, the first thing I think, Arsenal, I think you're going to start to see them kicking themselves. I think Arsenal fans, you look up the table and you see like Manchester City struggling without, we'll get to that, without Rodri. And you say like, man, if we could have won that game, all of a sudden we're 2 points behind Manchester City. I think that's the first take from it. But, I think sometimes, I used to watch this with Manchester United, back when they were, good in the early 2000s and, up to 2013. You would go and you'd play these teams and they just wouldn't want to, not that they wouldn't want to play, but they just like wouldn't, you just get super frustrated and you're watching, you're like, man, like, why don't they do? And you talk about tactics and, the other team has tactics too. I mean, what can you do? Like, if their strategy is to kind of like, compress and not let anything happen and try to hit on the count, whatever it is. And you're just getting stymied and you're sitting there watching it and you're like, why aren't we trying to score? Why aren't we trying to, why aren't we playing better? Why aren't we doing this? Sometimes, there's not much you can do, but it's super frustrating because you sit there and you're like, I know we can play better than this. And you're just watching. You're like, why aren't we playing better? Why aren't we playing better? Why aren't we playing better? Why aren't we going for it now? Oh, now we're down a goal. Like, let's go. Let's try to go for it. And it just never comes. And like at the end of the match, you're just like, the hell, like, why didn't we do something? It's just one of those games where they just couldn't get anything going at all. And
one thing that Arteta says is he talks about one of his things for the season really has been to win in any context, right?
Yes.
And
any
to
way
have
possible.
And to have your worst be better than their best, right? Those have been like the two things and themes that he's been talking about. And some days you just don't have it, right? Like some days, whatever it is. I think it actually really reminded me of the Man United game from last year at Old Trafford. Arsenal were dreadful that day. They got a jammy goal and they sat back and defended for a long time against a not good Man United team. And some of the players admitted it later or after the game. They're like, we weren't on it today, and that was the vibe that I really got at Newcastle. There was the game plan from Newcastle was great. Like it's block five mid block, 5 in the center, block the passing lanes, right? And when I'm not like the big tactician guy, right? But when you have those guys standing in the middle, you have to run, you have to carry the ball to them to attract them, to open the lanes, to open things up, right? And
you gotta try something different. Like you can't just
there was a contentment
run into the wall. And they had one shot on goal all game, and you're just like,
right.
Like, listen, like I think to a certain point, you got to play to your, this is our style. This is our style, whatever. But like 60th minute, I got 0 shots on target. I got 1 shot on target. Listen, we got to try something else, like plan B. What's our plan B? And, this is something over the last, like, when Van Gaal was in charge or whatever, when Mourinho was in charge, we'd take the lead and sit back. And you're just like, plan B was just like, hope they didn't score and they'd always score. Find a goal and be 1-1. And you're sitting there like, why didn't we just try to score? But like, what's the plan B if it's not working? And you just sit there and a game like that, and you're just like, man, there just didn't work. Like there was no plan B. Like sometimes you can't knock the ball around against these and play with flair. And I know that's kind of how they like to do it, but they just did. It just doesn't happen.
I think you can still do that, but there was no urgency in the team. Right? And that was the thing. There was nobody was like. Zinchenko was dawdling on the ball. Like there was no movement of. You can either move players or you can move the ball, and Arsenal weren't doing either, right?
Especially when you go down 1-0 early. Like,
right.
If it's 0-0 the whole game and you give up a goal in the 82nd minute and then you got to start, it's one thing. But like you give up a goal in the 12th minute, it's what you're losing. That like there's got to be some urgency at some point. 50, 60, 65 minutes. There's got to be some urgency. And they just didn't show it.
Yeah. And I think,
which makes the game on Wednesday even more frustrating because they're like, maybe they're saving their energy for the midweek game. And then they go and they lose to Inter, with half a, like, so now all of a sudden now you have 2 games in a row like that. And you're just like, man, and then you got this game this weekend, which becomes massive now.
Yeah, the game is definitely massive this weekend. I actually thought the midweek performance was way night and day from the Newcastle performance.
Yeah, they just didn't win the game.
They just didn't get the goal, right? And so, like, to me, I'll take that.
That happens sometimes. You lose. Like, listen, you play well, you don't get whatever. It happens, but like this sometimes when when you're watching a game and you're like, man, we didn't get one shot on goal. Like, why didn't we try? Why didn't we? And obviously they're trying, but
I mean, there was like a really terrible Declan Rice fumble of a chance there at the end, but you gotta. The reality is like, if Arsenal would have salvaged the draw, it would have been a salvage. Like, it wasn't because they were better and they missed. Like, you know what I mean? It would have been like you got away with one and got a draw, which happens. Like, that's you gotta in order to win the league. Like, you gotta have those jammy results, right?
Yep.
You saw Man City going to Bournemouth with 11 men and losing there fairly handily. Did you get a chance to watch that one? I think that was in your favorite window.
Yeah. I was watching a little bit of that. I was flipping around between that and the Nottingham Forest and some of the other games. But I just, I think I said it before. I mean, I think City missed Rodri. Obviously, the Ballon d'Or winner. It's kind of like a stupid statement to make, or like a statement that's like, oh yeah, well, duh. But
no shit.
They have. I mean, their squad is like. I mean, and Pep's talking about injuries and stuff like this. Listen, your squad. You pay more for your squad. When all these.
I mean, if this was their starting lineup: Ederson in goal, Vardiol, Ake, Akanji, Kyle Walker, Kovacic, Nunez, Gundogan, Silva, and Foden, and then Haaland up top, right? Like,
I can't.
I get it. You have injuries, but like also Pep, like that's the team that won the league 2 years ago. Right?
Yeah, so and people are, I mean, Manchester United started Johnny Evans and Victor Lindelof in center back. Like, I don't want to hear like
I don't want to hear your complaints, bro.
Well, and Rodri is a good player, but listen, if you're basing your entire existence over this last 5 years on one midfielder, like, and then all of a sudden he's not there, it's not like, I mean, that's ridiculous. You got all these other players. I think they're in trouble though. I think they struggle without him. Obviously, they're going to try to spend some money in January and bring somebody in, but he's not going to be the Ballon d'Or winner. That's for sure.
Right.
I think they're in a little bit of trouble. Like I said before, if I'm an Arsenal fan, I'm like, man, like this is the year City's finally like down a little bit, and like you look up and then see Liverpool. Without a loss. But I think City, I think this year, just the teams around them, like obviously Nottingham Forest is not going to stay up there that high. But I will say, like, Forest, that owner will spend whatever it takes. So they're going to get better.
And that was news this week, right? With Edu stepping down as the Arsenal sporting director and allegedly in line to take a multi-club model position for the owner of Nottingham Forest. So maybe he's involved in that January transfer window.
Yeah, I think they'll spend some money. Like I don't think they'll finish top 4, whatever. But like Chelsea, a lot of flaws. Aston Villa, all of a sudden now, they're Premier League form. They have 1 win in 5, and they looked awful midweek against Club Brugge. All of a sudden they're starting, they're all these extra games, all of these teams, when you start to play all these extra games, I don't think you're used to doing it. When Newcastle had to do it last year, when Brighton had to do it, these teams that aren't usually in these competitions, when you have to play these extra matches, all of a sudden it becomes tough. I mean, Aston Villa is going to be playing at least 8 extra matches, probably more than that, because they'll probably finish, they're still in the top 8, I believe. Tottenham's better, Brighton, Fulham. I mean, right now you got from 3rd to 11th is 19 to 15 points. I mean, there's a lot of teams on 15 points, 16 points. So I just think this is the year City maybe falling back a little bit, and then hopefully then we never see them again for 5 years while they're in the Conference League. But
while they're in the
League 7.
League 7.
They banished them to the Welsh League or something. They banished them to Scotland. But yeah, I think that game, the other game, the Spurs. I talked Nottingham Forest. They're very good. West Ham's a mess. I thought like after that, and they came out and said that goal, the penalty against Manchester United was dodgy. They said it was a mistake. I thought they would kind of come back down to earth. But the Fulham game on Monday, those two. I watched the whole match and then had to go outside to referee a basketball match, and I come back inside and I was like, wait, I'm getting 1,000 texts, and I'm like from Kyle, who was on a couple weeks ago, and they won. And I don't know what the hell happened. I was outside for 5 minutes. They scored 2 goals, but those
that was a bit of a barn burner.
Yeah, Monday. I always like those Monday games. Monday. It's a 3 p.m. kickoff for us here. It's 8 o'clock over there. I think they're always pretty good games. It's
they're fun. They're fun. It's nice to have that Monday energy. Speaking of Villa's run, they have 11 matches for the rest of to bring them to New Year's.
Yep.
And they have at Anfield against Liverpool.
Yep.
Then they host Crystal Palace. They host Juventus. They got the craziest draw of the teams coming versus going, but then they go to Chelsea. They play Brentford at home, Southampton at home. They go to Leipzig. They host. They go to Forest. They host Man City. They go to St. James's Park on Boxing Day, and then they close out the year against Brighton. So, some winnable games in there, but some really tough games.
Yeah, I think they're same thing. Unai, you talked about him. I think they're, is that sustainable? Last year, I think they kind of
they had Europa League, and he rotated the hell out of it, right? Yep. And they managed the competition, which is their right, and they did it well. But it's different gravy, you know what I mean? And I think they rotated a little bit yesterday, and you rotate a little bit, and the next thing you know, you're losing the Club Brugge on a dodgy penalty, and then you have to go to Anfield this weekend. So it's definitely, they have good players there. I think if they can stay fit, they should have a good chance to make top 4. But it's different playing in the Champions League, as we've discussed previously on this podcast. It's just it's a lot tougher, and it really shows you where your level is, right?
Yeah, like you said, Juventus, Leipzig, at Monaco, who's playing pretty well. They have a pretty good team, and then they finish on match day 8 of 8 when everybody's playing at the same time against Celtic, who's playing really well, and they're going to bring a lot of fans to that match. It's interesting. I would like to see, it's November 7th now. I mean, the match day 8 is until January 29th with this new format. But, I would be interested to see where they are January 1st. I think, some of these teams in the table, it's a little early for the Premier League, but, when you get to January 1st, after, right before that third round of the FA Cup, and you look up and you've played, 15, 18, 19 matches, something like that. You played everybody once. I think there's going to be a little bit more separation. I don't know. I mean, Liverpool, I don't know if anybody's going to be able to kind of play. I missed, on the preseason show, I thought they were going to struggle, but I still, they still could. Like, once again, they have some older players.
I mean, the thing is, they're one Achilles injury away from being finished.
If Mo Salah gets hurt, because Mo Salah's old, Van Dijk is, these players are older. If Salah's out for a month, like Holland, missed time a year or two ago. If they lose Salah, if they lose Van Dijk, if they lose, one of their midfielders for a month, especially in December, something like this, I like to see.
When you have a bunch of fixtures,
they haven't played the tough schedule of all time. So
they've had quite an easy schedule, but it's the points on the board matter, right? And you can only 100%. Play who you can 100%. Only play who you're scheduled against, and they've been putting the points on the board. So I think that brings us into match week 11, you have Liverpool hosting Aston Villa, Fulham go to Crystal Palace, Man City go down to the South Coast and face Brighton, Chelsea hosts Arsenal at Stamford Bridge, Champions League places Forest head up to St. James's Park, and then you have
way around.
Man United.
Forest hosts Newcastle.
Oh my days! I can never get this right.
That's all right.
It's
you do it always for one.
Once a week we have it done. You know what I mean? So if there's not one messed up, then did we even have the show?
That Forest Newcastle. Look, I mean, it's a weird schedule this weekend too. There's no early match. There's no like 12. It's 12:30 kickoff over there. There's 7:30 where I am. So there's no early match. But there is the late match, the 8 o'clock game over there, 3 o'clock in the afternoon here, Liverpool Villa. When I guess that when they do that 3 p.m. match, sometimes they'll get rid of that early match, and then there's 9 o'clock kickoffs for me on Sunday. And for obviously I'm watching Manchester United, but Forest Newcastle, I think it's a huge game. Forest they're playing very well. I'm not gonna say they're very good. They're playing very well, and once again, if they're anywhere near these top 6-7 spots in January, that owner is going to go. He bought 75 players over the last 4 windows or 5 windows. He's going to bring players in, and if they're up near the top, that players are going to want to go play there because that guy's going to give them money, and you got a chance to play in the Champions League or in Europe, in England. You're going to be able to bring some decent players in.
Yeah, for sure. They're definitely not afraid to spend money on transfer fees. I mean, At the end of the day, when you look at the salaries that are being paid throughout the continent versus what you're getting at a quote-unquote lower-level Premier League team, right? Brentford have managed to keep their salary structure to a certain extent. But outside of them, you have 10 to 15 teams that will happily play somebody £100,000 a week, right?
The crazy thing too about Forrest is doing it. Chris Wood has been, hey guys, unstoppable at this point. He's like prime Lewandowski. But sometimes you need that, and you get somebody like that going, and you're not paying him. You're paying him a decent amount of money, but like you said, probably not what some of these guys are making it United and some of these other clubs. And that allows them maybe a little bit of flexibility to bring somebody in, and then you're going to start seeing people, And I'll say too, if they get to the summer and they're in Europe, and look, Nottingham Forest is it's in history, it's a massive club. They have 2 European.
Yeah, absolutely.
Clubs. I mean, it's a massive club, and my guy. Goldbridge, my guy Goldbridge, his club, his boyhood club and stuff like that. But they're a big club, and they will be able to attract players in the summer if they're playing in Europe. And
even if they're playing in Conference League or Europa League, right?
Yeah, 100%. They're going to be able to bring players in, and that's. And I think Nuno's a good coach. I always watched. I think Tottenham wasn't a good fit for him because Tottenham's Tottenham. But when he was at Wolves, I every time there was a point in it was I think it was during COVID. It was either 2020 or 2021. Manchester United had to play Wolves like 3 times in like 16 days because they had them in the league, they had them in the FA Cup. It was a replay in the FA Cup, and they had him in the league. And you're just like, every match was this. It's either going to be 0-0 or 1-0 either way, and you're just praying it's your team that got the goal. And it was always a late goal, and they're brutal to play against. But this Forest team, I mean, when you look at the table, they've only allowed seven goals, which is second best in the whole league behind Liverpool's allowed 6. So they've allowed 7 goals in 10 matches. So Nuno's doing they have 4 draws. If they start turning some of those draws, they only have 1 loss. If they start turning some of those draws into victories, if they start finding some goals, which they've started to find now, all of a sudden, maybe they can stick around. I don't know. I think they're going to be able to stick around. They're a little bit like Fulham was last year early. They were the surprise team, or 2 years ago when they kind of started to fall back. But that's a big match against Newcastle. If they can beat Newcastle, I think people are going to start saying, "Man, this team is for real."
Yeah, I think they have game-changing players.
Yep.
Right, and I think that's what it comes down to. Semenyo, I think, is easily a top 6 team player, easily like European level, in my opinion. Game changer. Kirkez, game changer, right? And then when you have the team built kind of around those players, right? And with an amazing coach, right? I think that their coach is criminally underrated, and I think he's obviously. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm
Kirk's Bournemouth.
I'm looking at Bournemouth on my thing, and I'm thinking about Bournemouth and flipping the players. No,
Awoni and all, Callum Hudson.
But yeah, I mean, Forest has the opportunity to stack points and see where things rack up. That they are continuing to get results, right? And that's what you can ask for. And they're continuing to have good performances. Morgan Gibbs-White is a great player. Chris Wood can't miss the goal right now. Murillo is a really good defender. So you have these pieces that, like you said, if they can stay injury-free, the owner is going to come in January and throw money at the problem.
Yep.
And you can hang around, right? And if you have a team fall off like Aston Villa or one of those, I don't think they'll make Champions League, but I think they have a really good shot to get into like the Europa Conference League spots. The teams that I think that at least I thought were going to challenge for those positions are kind of nowhere to be found, right? I thought West Ham was going to be up there. I thought maybe even Brentford can make a run into one of those kind of last European spots. So yeah, it's up for grabs, right? If they have the staying power and they put the points on the board, who knows what can happen in a couple months.
I think they're one of these teams that obviously you never know. With it all depends on the draw, but when you get to January in the FA Cup, that's nobody's going to want to play, and then all of a sudden you look up and it's the round 6 and they're still in it, and obviously once again
because they'll play their first 11 and other people will rotate, and next thing you know they're in like a quarter or semifinal.
Yeah, I think they're a dangerous team. I mean, I just think just the way they play, they don't give up goals. They're going to be in every match here, and I against Newcastle, that's a pretty. It's I don't understand why USA has the Spurs Ipswich match on instead of that Forest Newcastle. Obviously Manchester United lesser doesn't make sense, but why Spurs Ipswich? I mean, that Nottingham Forest Newcastle game, like the NFL has enough sense to start flexing, like they flex the Giants and the the Jets and somebody out of the 8:30
the prime windows, right?
Yeah, because it's like, who wants to watch this? Well, you'd think that they would put this on USA because I think those are two teams people probably want to watch. And then
I think there's a crazy amount of Spurs fans in the States, and I think that's probably a bigger reason rather than the competitive nature of those fixtures. But we got some good ones. So what obviously you have Arsenal, Chelsea, which I honestly think is a must-win game for Arsenal. You played Chelsea last weekend. What was your takeaways from that one?
It was a terrible game. We scored. We took the lead, and you can't even you can't keep the lead for 4 minutes. I mean, it was a great goal. Casado's goal was really good, and it shouldn't have been a corner, but it is what it is. But But I wasn't super impressed. I've watched Chelsea a lot because they're always they score goals, and usually I'm betting on them or doing something on the other. I wasn't super impressed by them last week, to be honest. I thought we played I thought we could have beat them, and just kind of upset once you take the lead. I think it always sucks to kind of give it up, but wasn't super impressed. I mean, I think for Chelsea. They just played today, and wherever I don't even know where they were today. Conference League.
Noah FC.
That's
It
right.
was
They played
8-0.
against and people were upset like that Noah didn't play a 2x2x2x2x2 formation, a 2-2-2-2-2 formation, which would have been pretty funny. But yeah, I think for Arsenal, it's a much bigger game for Arsenal than it is for Chelsea. Obviously, it's always a big game when Chelsea plays Arsenal, but for Arsenal, especially going into this break, the thing that, and then you got Nottingham Forest coming out of the break. I think the thing that sucks for Arsenal right now, especially if you don't get a draw, you get a loss here. You got 2 weeks and you're like, man, we can't change the form around. Like, we got to go on international break, and you never know what happens on international break. Somebody can get hurt, whatever. But if you win, if you beat Chelsea, all of a sudden now you're back, you're back on you flipped it around. You're back in the top 4. You're going into the break with a little momentum. You always want to kind of go into that break with a little momentum. That's why I'm kind of happy United has Leicester here. I mean, they got to make it count. But I think for Arsenal, it's the last game before the break. I mean, it's a showcase game. Everyone else is done. Everyone's going to be watching it, and they got, especially after the last 2 games, they got to show up. I would think they do. I just don't. They're just one at this point now. Like, I think they're too good to go into like the international break on like, 3 matches in a row where you lost and you kind of maybe didn't play well in some of them. I think they're going to be up for it. Obviously, there's going to be some goals. I would think. I would probably shade towards Arsenal winning the match. I think you can get it at Chelsea. Once again, I don't think they're great defensively, but I think for Arsenal, it's such a must win that they're going to play differently. That's just the way I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you'll guaranteed see Declan Rice in the starting lineup. He was a precaution. It'll be interesting to see if Marino makes it after getting punched in the head by Summer over the midweek game. When I was looking at the head-to-head matches with Chelsea over the last few years, Arsenal have really had Chelsea's number. Yeah. Obviously, Chelsea are in their like kind of fallow period, but the tail end of that, Chelsea was a good team, or the early part of it, right? So I think over the 1, 2, 3, 4, the last 5 league matches Arsenal have won, dating back to spring of 2022. Right, so last year, obviously, you had the 5-0 home win. You had the draw away, where it was a game just like the St. James's Park one of this weekend, where Arsenal didn't show up, and then Declan Rice apparated at 70 minutes, and the keeper had a missed kick. He hit it into the corner, and then they got one at the end from a Bukayo Saka. Half-space cross to the back post with Trossard. The year before that at home, it was 3-1. And now in the reverse fixture at Stamford Bridge was the Gabriel header, where Aubameyang was playing and Gabriel ran the wrong way to run it back in front of Aubameyang. So, it's definitely been a entertaining fixture the last couple of years. I think that my score prediction for this one is 3-1 Arsenal. I think Cole Palmer is friend of the show, is a really amazing player, and I think he will have those little pockets that he needs. If I was Maresca, I would play Neto on the wing, on one wing and Madueke on the other wing, and really try to pin back the Arsenal wingers as much as possible with the attackers, and then play Palmer with Fernandez and Caicedo. And at the end of the day, like, Cole Palmer doesn't do any defensive duty, right? And I think when you're playing a team like Arsenal, you can't afford to have people who are not putting in shifts, right? Like, if you want to get a result against Arsenal, it has to be full back, everybody. And that was, you saw this weekend with Newcastle, right? Like, everybody was singing from the same hymn sheet. All of them were on the same page. All of them were busting their butts for the team. And I don't think that Chelsea has that unity or discipline to do that for 90 minutes, right? And so that's what I think. It'll probably be like 2-1, and then Arsenal get a late third. That's kind of my how I see it. I think that it's weird. I also think Chelsea are very susceptible to the press, right? It's interesting. You have both Caicedo and Enzo, who have definitely looked better under Maresca than they have previously. Like, Caicedo looked so bad last year, and I think a lot of people have said that he's a system player, and in certain systems he thrives well. And I think you saw that last year where he was in a different system and he looked terrible. But this year in the Maresca system, which is more similar to the systems that he's played in previously, he's looked a lot better. But I'm not sure if those guys have the ability to work out of the press consistently, right? I think they can get it done here and there, but I think over a game, if Arsenal are really timing their press well, I think if you get Havertz at the 9 where he's leading the press from the front, I don't think Odegaard will play a big role, but I'll probably make some kind of appearance depending on the game state. But that's another big thing, right? Arsenal have Odegaard back. He made a cameo at the end of the match yesterday. I think he'll be able to spend this international break in Colney, working back up his fitness. And then, I think that's if you're Arsenal, you want to get this result this weekend, and then everybody's back after this international break, and you got to go on a run, right? Kind of like they did on the second half of last year.
Yep.
You have to go on a run, and you have the people there, and hopefully they can get their fullbacks back fit, because I think that was what you saw in those couple games, the Southampton game, the Leicester game, and you had these really dynamic fullback runs. And like we were talking about in terms of earlier, the problem at Newcastle, you were solving that by the dynamic fullbacks, right? You had like Calafiori, who was wanting to carry the ball and make these like lung-busting runs and pull players out of position, right? And I think when you don't quite have the forward firepower, right, you have to create that dynamism from other places.
Yep.
And it's going to be a fun weekend.
I think I always talk about the 10 a.m. matches on Saturday. I think when you look up at those, obviously West Ham, Everton, the main one to me is Wolves and Southampton. That's a massive, massive game for both teams. Southampton, all of a sudden now, with that win last week and now 2 wins on the bounce, they've been playing all right, in these competitions, because, they won in the Carabao Cup. So now, if they win here, all of a sudden they're on 7 points, and, they put a little bit of a gap between Wolves. And same thing with Wolves. Wolves have been playing better. You get 2 draws here. If they win here, they're on 6 points. And I think both of these Wolves, I think is at some point, if they get some of these players back, I just think they're going to start playing a little bit. I think they're going to start getting some results. Southampton, I'm not sure about. These 2 wins could be big, but
the difference between Southampton and Wolves is their goals, right?
Yeah.
Wolves have the goals to be able to make it out.
They just got to stop. You can't give up 27 goals.
You can't give up 27 goals and hope to stay out.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
But you can, if you got to reel that in. but they can score enough goals to win games, right?
Yeah.
And that's Southampton's problem right now, is that they don't have the goals on the front end. So it's going to be, you might have a decent defensive numbers, but it's going to be tough to stay up if you're scoring less than a goal a game, right? It's going to make it for a really difficult time.
And I think
I'm really fast
teams like now, it's one team can't score, one team can't stop giving up goals, and now you play. And I think Southampton's going to say, like, listen, this could be the game where we score goals, and Wolves could say, listen, this is be the game where maybe we shut somebody down and maybe we can get some goals.
right.
Both teams are going to go for it. This is going to be one of these games, in that hidden 10 o'clock window on Peacock where, maybe there's going to be some goals, or it could be 0-0. Who knows?
Like and subscribe on YouTube if you haven't already. I'm really interested in the another game in that same window is the Crystal Palace Fulham game. Crystal Palace have kind of seemingly maybe perhaps turned a corner, coming off of a draw in their last time out. They drew Wolves 2-2, high scoring draw there. But they host Fulham, who Fulham have, like you said, they had that result where they came back with 2 goals in the 90th minute, right? Like
90 plus 2, 90 plus 7, yeah.
Yeah. So, and if I watched the full Fulham Everton Fulham game the other day, they look pretty good.
Yeah, I think they have. Like you said, they're Arsenal late at this point. They have some players, and I think over the course, Marco Silva's a good manager. Fulham will be one of these teams. You look at them; they're 4 wins, 3 draws, 3 losses right now, +1 goal differential. They'll score some goals. They'll win some games. By the end of the year, they'll probably have 13 wins, 13 draws, 12 losses, something like this. And you'll look up and they have 55 points, and maybe they're fighting, they'll be top 10 or something like this. So, I think that's an interesting game as well. But it seems like Fulham and these teams, there's like a London derby every week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of them. And that was something that I think it was a Wenger saying that's why it's harder for a London team to win the league, because you have so many derbies that you don't have when you're a Manchester team or a team from Merseyside. But yeah, I think that game is going to be really interesting. You have the dynamism of Iwobi, Smith Rowe, who interchanged on a nice goal a couple of weeks ago. Harry Wilson, who's kind of come out of nowhere with the big 2 goals. Jimenez, he's really been on fire the last couple of weeks. So, I think ultimately Fulham will get that one done, 2-1. But it could definitely end up being an entertaining game. It's tough. Palace are missing Wharton, who I believe he just had a surgery. Eze is out. He got injured last week. Did Nketiah come off? I can't remember if he's going to be fit for this one. So, they're definitely struggling with injury right now, Crystal Palace, and we'll see where they can end up and if they keep Glasner around, regardless of the results that they get. Any last notes for this match week?
I just, once again, it's going to be pretty interesting looking at these results. These teams, there's a lot of teams in here that are really kind of similar, not in talent, and these games are going to be close. I don't think there's going to be a lot of every week. I think there's, it's not like some of these other leagues where it's going to be a rout. These teams are all tough, so
the gap between 7th and 14th is 5 points.
Yeah, right? And then there's not, there's not much. Obviously, Manchester United under the greatest manager of all time, Ruben Amorim, is going to come in and he's going to, it's going to take them time, but they're going to be better. I think they're going to be playing better. And some of these teams, you're going to see them going up and down the table, and there's not much between most of them.
Yeah. When does he start? Did they say yet?
Yeah, he will take charge for after the international break against Ipswich, I think. So he'll take charge November 11th. He'll manage their last game before the international break in I think it's away for Sporting, and then he'll get on a plane with all the coaches and come over here and have 2 weeks off. Hopefully everybody from the team backs out of the international duty so they can work on some stuff for 2 weeks and kind of hit the ground running. But I mean, people think this is going to be immediate. Like they're just there's too many bums in the squad. It's going to take a while, but they'll be better, and by the end of the year I think they'll be better.
I mean, they definitely, at least to start, right? They in the league they have Ipswich, and then they host Everton, and then they go to the Emirates. But those first two will give them the opportunity to gain some confidence under the new manager, and kind of see where things shake out from there. And then they're going to have a really tough test at the Emirates. But I think Amarim has shown that he has the ability to have a really solid game plan against Arsenal. So it'll be. I think it's going to be an interesting go, and I definitely think that they can't get worse than what they've been doing lately.
Oh yeah, I think they'll be. They just look. They won today. They just got to get into that. It doesn't matter where they finish in the Europa League as long as they're in the top 24. And by the time it'd be nice to get in the top 8, but as long as they're in the top 24, he's going to take charge, and maybe by the end of the year they're flying in the Europa League and the FA Cup, and they're still in the Carabao Cup, and they're moving up the table. So
yeah, I think you have a chance to hopefully challenge for a trophy, and then use that as a building step for next year. But I think that's all we have for today. Thanks so much for jumping on today, Sean. It's great to see you, and we'll check in next week after this pretty fun game week. Cheers, bro.
No problem. Should upload right away.